travelers may be questioning whether the recent changes in airplane companies will impact their plans or fares. Joining us now to break it all down is Senior Editor of Travel Pulse Canada, Jim Byers. Nice to have you here.
Thanks,
Jim. Thank you so much. So obviously, what does it mean for the average traveler right now? I mean, does it depend on whether you're flying Air Canada or the WestJet? Let's start with Air Canada. I mean, taking over the transatlantic in many cases.
Right.
What do you think?
Well, you know, there is a 30-day window here that somebody else could jump in at the end of 30 days, and
you never know.
You never know, and you know, WestJet, now that it has Onex and Jerry Schwartz's money behind it, it certainly has much deeper pockets than they did 4 or 5 days ago. They're a possibility. There's a couple of groups in Quebec, based in Quebec, that have talked about jumping in that might want to make the purchase. But yes, Air Canada is a very formidable opponent in something like this.
But bottom line, less competition overall. Is this a good thing for consumers or a bad thing?
Well, I don't think anybody's ever jumped up and down when there's less competition. I mean, we all know just inherently that when there's less competition, it usually means prices are, at best, they're going to stay equal, and at worst, they're probably going to increase, whether that's, you know, Tim Hortons coffee or flowers or whatever it may be. So from that standpoint, less competition is not a good thing.
Yeah, because when we heard it, you think, I don't think anybody was happy about it, because that's the first thing you think.
Well, yeah, and you look at it.
Prices are going to go up.
Right, you look at it, and right now you mentioned Europe, transatlantic, and you know, on the sun destination side of things, if you add Air Canada and Transat together, they would have 40 to 45% of the Canadian market flying to sun destinations, Mexico, Caribbean. You've still got pretty good competition from the likes of WestJet, Sunwing, so a lot of competition for those north-south routes. Where you might run into problems is Europe. If you combine Air Canada, and Transat, you're looking at 60 to 65%, 2/3 of the market, one control.
Is that, I mean, given all this, we know how difficult the airline industry is overall, but is there an opportunity for these low budget or potentially, you know, one on the horizon coming up and sort of stealing some of those customers because people just can't afford to fly as often as they did? Yeah,
you know, you've got Canada Jetlines is taking possession of their first plane later this year, they said just the other day. We were talking earlier with Jen about Wow Air, that, you know, that was one that was there for a while with like really ridiculously low fares to Europe.
That was exciting, because I thought, I'm going to Europe.
But then they fell by the wayside, which often happens with these fly-by-night or cheaper airlines. So this is a very expensive country to run a really cheap Ryanair type of airline. I don't know that those are going to succeed. Where there's hope, I think, for consumers in this situation is WestJet especially. WestJet generally has been expanding their European offerings. They just started flying Calgary to London on a 787 Dreamliner, so they're going after the business market. They're flying Calgary to Paris. Their first flight is today, actually, as I recall. Toronto to Barcelona starts in a couple weeks on WestJet.
So overseas, between WestJet and Air Canada, you could see, obviously, with competition, it could affect. You know,
I think that's the silver lining here. If it was just Air Canada buying Transat, if it was this week, I think people would be pretty scared. The fact that WestJet is now being purchased by Onex, which has very deep pockets, is, I think, a good move, and I think that's going to help balance things out for consumers in the long run.
Now, we don't have a lot of time, but I always wonder what's next in terms of what else is going to be taken away, because when you look at just in flying the plane,
right,
you know, flying, you no meals anymore, or you got to buy this, you know.
Hey, $3 for your blanket.
What else are they going to take away?
I don't think there's much left. Well, there was, you know, every once in a while somebody will put out a bit of a joke press release about we're going to have stand-up, like make it the TTC, exactly, the red rocket in the sky. So let's hope it never comes to that, but
you never know.
You never know. But you know, the budget airlines are they tend to come and go. So I think over the long run, it's going to be interesting to watch what happens with Air Canada and Transat if this goes through, and then WestJet's the key.